Hello and welcome back. Today we are continuing with our Gravis Armour Captain. Last time we did the base layers, the undercoats. We already had the priming done, so that was something we didn't have to worry about. But this time we're going to be focusing on some of the smaller details and the weapons. So I think to start out here, we'll go with our, I believe this is corn red, as I give it a nice little shake. Look at that. Get it somewhat focused. Good enough. You can read it. If not, I read it out to you, so there you go. And we're going to be going with somewhat of a smaller brush today. Last time we used the same size all over. This time we have two different sizes we're going to be switching between as we do some of the final details here. I guess finer. Oh my lord, I can't speak today. Whatever, either one works. Just whatever word you want to pick there. And we're going to be doing a nice coverage layer on our weapons. And I thought about doing these in black or just leaving them, kind of as they were. But I think red is a much better color. It kind of contrasts more with the dark green. So that's what we're going to be going with. And excuse the horribly weird angles here. I'm just trying to do the other weapon. Getting in here kind of as cleanly as we can. Such a small enclosed area, and just getting all of it red there. Perfect. And let's move around to the other side. Again, horribly weird, I know. Having the painting handle doesn't help when you have to do awkward angles, I promise. There we are. It's nice and even. Don't worry about the ammo kind of cylinder there. We'll be doing that silver, so we don't have to worry about getting too much coverage on it. But let me just take a nice little look here. I think generally that's kind of all we want to do with our red for the most part. Maybe we'll do the handle too, right? We can change it in the future if we want, but for now I think we will do a little bit on there. And as this all dries, we will be going back over it all with a second, possibly even third layer. In between parts, I did do a little bit of cleanup just to kind of save us some time, also make things look a little bit nicer. It's still not perfect. In between this and the next one, I'll probably do more cleanup. But generally, this is kind of how our guy's going to look when he's finished. Minus a little bit of gold and the servo skull being finished, obviously. But, if you're just following along and you stopped at this part, I'd say we're honestly pretty close to our end goal, right? And actually, I don't know why I just closed that. Please forgive me. I forgot we're doing a second layer. I was ready to move on to our Balthazar gold already, and, I just wasn't quite at that point yet. So again, doing just another really quick layer. Get kind of as close to the hand here as we can without getting it red on accident. Covering that handle, it's dried now. And flip it around and we'll do the other side. My favorite thing, and I don't know what it is about it, is doing these chain swords. I really love just doing the teeth with a little bit of silver. I think it's honestly just, it's therapeutic in a way. It's very easy to do. You don't have to worry about kind of messing it up too much. And it's just something I always enjoy doing. So I always try to take chain swords on every unit I can. And unfortunately with Dark Angels, that isn't really kind of a great tactic, I feel like. I think you want kind of as many plasma guns as you can. So once we get to Blood Angels and we do their combat patrol, that's where I will definitely shine. I just love chain swords. I think they're awesome. I think they're fun to paint. In terms of, how realistic they are, not at all, I feel like. Especially, I mean, there's an argument to be made, and this is like all of 40K summed up pretty well, is people just arguing about, how realistic it is. I think against, like, Armour, a chainsaw sword could be kind of cool, but against, like, flesh, like, power swords are just the way to go, right? They make infinitely more sense. But, it's just pedantic argument for the sake of argument, so we won't worry about it too much. I will be moving on to our next color here, which is Balthazar Gold. As always, show it off for you guys a little bit. And we'll be using this for the kind of centerpiece on top of his head there. I think... No, never mind. Iron halos are a different thing. I'm not really sure what this would be called. I'm not too crazy worried about it, but it is, you know, an interesting thing to know, I guess. So if you do know, let me know in the comments, maybe. And again, just a very nice thick layer, because metallic paints always turn out to be thick for me. It's not great. I would have rather had that come out a little bit thinner, but it'll look fine once it dries. And I'm actually going to switch to a little bit of a smaller brush there. We're going to do the eagle on his chest as well. Or I guess it's technically a skull underneath. And we'll get our nice, very small brush here for detail work as I knock my desk lamps around. Don't worry about that too much. And make sure it's properly thin this time. I do have to get nice and close because I don't want to mess up too badly here. And I'm going to be getting into the weird angles again very shortly. Don't worry. Unfortunately, when I was assembling this model, a little bit of I used Tamiyama plastic glue, and it tends to melt your models a little bit. I think it's technically an acetone. So I did spill a little bit of it on this side of our chest piece. So it looks just a little bit kind of out of focus compared to the other side. But maybe it's not noticeable enough. And maybe me pointing it out to you makes you notice it. So just ignore that. Just don't worry about it too much. Very quick and easy though. There is kind of that strap in the middle covering most of it. So we will worry about that soon. I also want to get this silver little... idol down here, I guess. Silver? No. I was thinking about it being silver for some reason. We're painting it gold. And on its own, the Balthazar gold does look like a solid gold color, but compared to Retributive armor, it's much more of like a kind of brass look, which I've actually come to like a lot. When I first started using it, I wasn't really sure about it. I thought it kind of looked a little bit too much like brass, but as I've been using it more and more, I've just really grown attached to it. And we're going to be hitting all these little skulls. He has quite a few of them over his model. He has one on the shoulder pad as well. And be a little bit careful here. I don't want to spill too much of it around. Perfect. Make sure we get it from every angle. And he also has this little eagle emblem on his sword we want to get. We're actually going to be using the back of our brush for this. Kind of helps with that raised up area. And just generally do one nice layer. I have to get a little bit more on our brush to do the rest of the wing here. I think there might be one on the other side of the sword as well. That would make sense. So we will do that. Yes, there is. And I feel like this is going to get even more awkward to do. Maybe, if I can keep it on camera. Thankfully, I do have this painting handle now. When I was painting my Dreadnought, man, I had such weird grips all over it. Because I just had to grab the model itself or the base, and it made for some really hard times trying to avoid kind of wet paint. But thankfully, this model does fit on our painting handle, so I'm able to have that little creature comfort back. And one last little skull we'll get right back here. And perfect. I'll have to do a little bit of cleanup on that afterwards, but for the most part, that's fine. Moving on to our next color here. I think I actually might have to go find one more. Never mind. I do have, if I can avoid knocking the camera too much, I do have dry bark. We use that for that little strip in front of our model. Here we are. I was looking for my lead belcher. Give it a nice little shake, as always. And I've actually been pretty good about peaking the microphone with our paint pots, at least. I have managed to bump everything on my desk a number of times, so I do need to still work on, spatial awareness. But with our lead belcher, we're going to start with the easiest bit, which is going to be our ammo belt, I guess. Kind of the feeding belt. I don't know how any of this really connects together cohesively, because bolter rounds are like huge, right? And I think that's what this thing is on his arm. It reminds me of like a storm bolter, but his little ammo thing here is relatively tiny. You know, I don't want to dive too much into the logistics of the 40K universe at the risk of sounding too much like an Ultramarine fan, but you know, it's gotta make sense somewhere, right? Like if his entire backpack was a big ammo pack, a la like Helldivers 2 style, I'd find that much more believable. But that's fine. We'll play it as it lies. Maybe it's like a flamer. No, not even. I don't know. I really don't know what that's meant to be. I only guess that because there's like a kind of fuel tube going to it as well, but I think that's meant to be like a power cord. I do not know. It looks cool though, I'll give him that. I really like the wrist mounted weapons, or the kind of back of the arm mounted stuff. I think it makes him look great. I think it's a really cool addition. I think there was an option for a flamer of this model as well, I just didn't put him on there. And let's get the other side of this as well, doing the best we can to make this kind of neat and tidy. Cameras have a terrible time focusing because I'm moving around too much, and I'm getting some really weird angles, but it's okay, bear with me. And we'll also be doing kind of the tip of his gun. Now I'm sure there'll be comments at some point telling me to drill the barrels. I don't have anything to do that with, and also I'm kind of terrified to do it anyway. I feel like I would just mess up horribly. So we're going to avoid that for now, maybe in the future. And I think last but not least, with the silver, we're going to do all these little tubes and cords that are kind of attached all over our little guy here. Back of the legs. I think these are meant to be like hydraulic cords, maybe. I can't really think of what else they would be, especially connected to the legs like that. And man, I don't know if I'll be able to reach that one in the back there. I'm sure you can see it if I turn it at a weird angle. I'll try. I'll definitely try. Kind of going in blind here, unfortunately. And my brush is having a tough time even reaching that. So we'll do a little bit of coverage, and then we won't worry about the rest of it. And actually, I need to get the other side of this ammo as well. There we are. I love this model, but good lord, there's so many little nooks and crannies that you gotta watch out for that are just really hard to reach. And we'll do the other side. Careful not to knock anything around too much. I don't want to break this guy. Especially that servo skull. I'm very excited to paint him. I talked about it last time, but I've had a model in the past with a servo skull on it, and I broke it off accidentally. And I just haven't had one since. So I'm very excited to do this little guy. And as always, we're going to do a little silver on his cord here. I really love the idea of servo skulls, even though it's kind of terrifying, right? Like they're servitors that they just took the skull out of, so it's like a real person. And servitors, if you don't know, some of them, they're just like indentured slaves basically that are turned into machines. Kind of. There's a really weird kind of definition about some of them. Like one of the books I was reading, they basically had like giant forklifts that were servitors. So I don't really know like where the extent of that technology goes, but I think it's like the rule of cool factor, right? You just kind of turn it into whatever is useful. But some of them like have sentience, somewhat. Like they're still, they don't have free will, but they're like actively alive and like aware of what's happening. And the skull is just like a continuation of that. It's like the same thing, but it's literally just their skull floating around. Kind of terrifying, if I'm being honest. But we are going to move on to our next little color here, which is specifically for the skull and probably for that rock as well, which is Rakarth Flesh. It might be a little bit too dark for what I want to do here, but we will try it out. And it actually won't take that much, so we're just going to get a little bit on our brush here. And kind of trying to avoid messing up the silver we just did. Let's go ahead and apply it all over that side of our servo skull. Perfect. I've talked about it before in a different video, but my first Warhammer books I read were, well, one of the first, were the Gaunt's Ghost novels. And I swear this connects to the servo skull eventually. One of the things I've noticed is they don't really explain a lot of like the terms in universe until you get like context clues around them, like a vox, right? None of the books I've read have really explained what a vox is. They just kind of assume you already know. And if you don't know, it's like their radio, right? But it's also like they use it for GPS and stuff. And there's a couple of different types of vox. There's like planetary voxes with like antennas and satellites. But then there's also like like fleet-wide vox between ships. It's really weird, and you know it's not explained very well for the most part. But they did the same thing with servo skulls and servitors when I first read about them. It was just like, oh, a servitor appears. Cool. Like it'll describe it to you as like a mindless, machine human hybrid thing. But for the most part, it doesn't like outright say, what it is, and it's a little annoying. I really wish, most of these, especially the newer books with like the newer lore, I kind of wish they came with like a glossary. Like once you know what some of the stuff in universe is, it gets much easier. But man, a little bit of help at the start would be great. And it'll help us get some new fans, maybe. And we're gonna be doing. It's gonna take us a couple layers, but I'll do that off camera. Don't worry too much about it. These little ribbons, I guess is what you want to call them. Kind of like parchment. And it looks terrible, but that's only because the paint is so thin right now. We're just gonna do as best as we can to not mess up that green armor underneath. I think that's just about all of it. Maybe. The last thing I want to do before we finish up this video is that sash on the front. And like I said before, we're going to be busting open our Dryad bark. It's a very nice shade of brown. I think I've used it on literally every single video I've done so far. Give it a nice little shake. And didn't peak the microphone that time. Perfect. Just going to get a little bit of that on our brush. Maybe a little bit more. It's kind of watered down. And we're going to try to use the same trick we've been doing with some of these raised up areas where we use the back kind of curve of our brush. And just very lightly, if I can manage it. My hands are a little bit shaky at this point. Perfect so far. There we go. Gets a little bit tougher as we get into these further recesses. And you can see I spilled a little bit on that armor there, but that's fine. I'll clean it back up in a minute, don't worry. I'll actually probably have to wait for that to dry, so I'll do it, in between parts. It's fine. Don't worry about it too much. Everything can be fixed once you make the mistake. It's nothing to worry about. And let me do one final once over as we kind of do a little spin around here. I think that's probably going to wrap it up for this part. In between, I will clean up all the small details we just did. We'll make it look all nice and neat. But next time, we'll probably start with dry brushing. Maybe a wash or two, and generally we'll be getting ready to kind of finish things off. So, if you enjoyed this, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. I also have a Patreon. Link is in the description. It just helps me kind of support this channel and, do more videos more often. Otherwise, thank you guys very much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next episode.